The stagecoach rattled into Durango, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in July 1878, carrying a woman whose name had already poisoned the air before her arrival. Beatrice Reynolds pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, watching the main street unfold before her with a mixture of hope and dread coiling in her stomach. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to become the bride of a rancher she had never met, a man who had answered her advertisement with surprisingly kind letters over the past 4 months. What he did not know, what she had not told him in those carefully worded responses, was that she was fleeing a scandal that had destroyed her reputation so thoroughly that even her own family had turned their backs on her. The stage lurched to a stop outside the Rocky Mountain Hotel, and Beatrice gathered her worn carpetbag with trembling fingers. She wore her best traveling dress, a modest gray wool that had seen better days, and her dark blonde hair was pinned beneath a simple bonnet. At 22 years old, she had already learned that beauty could be as much a curse as a blessing, and that people were quick to believe the worst about a woman when given half a reason. As she stepped down from the coach, accepting the driver's weathered hand for balance, she noticed the stairs immediately. A cluster of women outside the general store stopped their conversation to watch her with narrowed eyes. 2 men lounging against the saloon wall straightened up, their expressions shifting from curiosity to something harder, more judgmental. Her heart sank. How could they possibly know already, Miss Reynolds? A deep voice spoke from behind her, and Beatrice turned to find herself facing a man who was not the rancher she expected to meet. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical labor. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a clear gray blue that seemed to look straight through her defenses. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest over a cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark brown hair that needed cutting. "I am Beatrice Reynolds," she acknowledged carefully, wondering who this man was and where her intended husband might be. "Warren Lansing," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that seemed automatic. "I ranch about 10 miles north of town. Thomas Garrett asked me to meet you. He got thrown from a horse 3 days ago and broke his leg pretty bad. He is laid up at the doctor's office and sent me with his apologies." Beatrice felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had come all this way to marry a man who was now injured and unable even to greet her himself. The situation was humiliating, made worse by the continued stares of the townspeople around them. "I see," she managed to say, though her voice sounded thin even to her own ears. "Is he going to recover?" "Doc says he will be fine in a few weeks, but he cannot walk yet and definitely cannot manage a wedding right now." Warren's gaze was steady and assessing, but not unkind. "He asked if you would be willing to wait and said he would pay for your room at the hotel until he is back on his feet." Before Beatrice could respond, a woman's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. "Well, I suppose we should not be surprised that Thomas Garrett's mail-order bride would have a reputation that precedes her." Beatrice turned to see a tall, thin woman in an expensive dress approaching with 2 companions flanking her like sentries. The woman's face was pinched with disapproval, her mouth a tight line of judgment. "Mrs. Harrington," Warren said, and there was a note of warning in his tone. "Do not Mrs. Harrington me, Warren Lansing. We all received the telegram from my cousin in Philadelphia. This woman," she gestured at Beatrice with undisguised contempt, "was caught in a compromising position with a married man. She destroyed a marriage and has the audacity to come out here pretending to be respectable." The words hit Beatrice like physical blows. She had known her past might follow her, but she had not expected it to arrive before she did. Her face burned with shame and anger, but years of enduring such accusations had taught her that defending herself only made things worse. "That is not what happened," she said quietly, knowing it would do no good. "Of course you would say that," Mrs. Harrington sniffed. "Jezebels always do." "That is enough." Warren's voice had gone hard as iron, and he stepped slightly in front of Beatrice in a protective gesture that surprised her. "You were not there, Mrs. Harrington, and neither was your cousin. Gossip is not the same as truth. The evidence was quite clear, according to my cousin. This woman was found alone in a locked room with Harold Pemberton, who was at that time engaged to be married to someone else. The engagement was broken off, his reputation in tatters, and this woman fled like the coward she is." Beatrice wanted to scream the truth. She wanted to tell them that Harold Pemberton had forced his attentions on her, that he had cornered her in that room and locked the door himself, that she had been fighting him off when his fiancée and her family burst in. She wanted to explain that no one had believed her, because Harold came from money and influence, while she was merely a governess in his cousin's household. She wanted to describe how quickly she had been dismissed, how the whispers had followed her, how impossible it had become to find any work at all. But she had learned that the truth did not matter when people had already decided what to believe. Warren turned to look at her, and Beatrice forced herself to meet his gaze despite the shame burning in her chest. She expected to see doubt there, or worse, the same condemnation she had seen in so many other faces over the past year. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, searching. "Is it true you were found alone with an engaged man?" he asked directly. "Yes," she answered, because lying about facts would only make things worse. "But not by my choice. He locked me in that room and I was trying to get away from him when we were discovered. No one believed me then, and I do not expect you to believe me now." Warren studied her face for a long moment while Mrs. Harrington made a disgusted sound, and the other townspeople watched with avid interest. Beatrice lifted her chin and refused to look away, even though everything in her wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Finally, Warren settled his hat back on his head and picked up her carpetbag. "I judge you by who you are right now," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the street. "Not by gossip or rumors about who you might have been. Far as I can tell, you just stepped off a stagecoach looking tired and worried, and you deserve the same courtesy we would show any newcomer to Durango." He turned to Mrs. Harrington with a look that could have cut glass. "Maybe you should remember that bearing false witness is a sin, and that judging others is supposed to be God's job, not yours." Then he gestured toward the hotel. "Come on, Miss Reynolds. Let us get you settled, and then I will take you to see Thomas if you are up for it." Beatrice followed him on legs that felt unsteady, deeply aware of the shocked whispers erupting behind them. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever suggested that her version of events might be the true one. The simple act of being believed, even by a stranger, created a tightness in her throat that threatened tears. Inside the hotel, Warren arranged for her room with quiet efficiency, paying for a week in advance from money Thomas had apparently provided. The clerk, a balding man with suspicious eyes, kept glancing at Beatrice as though she might steal the silverware, but Warren's presence seemed to keep him civil. Once she had been given a key to a second-floor room, Warren carried her bag upstairs and set it just inside the door with careful respect for propriety. "Thank you," Beatrice said, and was frustrated by how inadequate the words sounded. "You did not have to do that. Defend me, I mean." Warren shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Harrington likes to think she runs this town with her gossip and judgments. Someone needs to stand up to her now and then, or she will make everyone miserable. Still, you do not know me. You have no reason to believe my word over hers." "I have no reason not to," Warren countered. He leaned against the door frame, his posture relaxed, but his eyes intense. "I have known plenty of men who thought their position or their money gave them the right to take liberties with women. I have also known women who got blamed for things that were done to them rather than by them. You look like someone who has been carrying a heavy weight for a long time. That does not look like guilt to me. It looks like injustice." Beatrice had to turn away, blinking hard against the sudden sting of tears. She had been so strong for so long, enduring whispers and accusations, scraping together every penny for the train fare west, hoping desperately that she could start over somewhere no one knew her name. To have someone simply acknowledge that she might be telling the truth was overwhelming. "Would you like to rest before going to see Thomas?" Warren asked gently. "Or would you rather get it over with? I will not judge either choice." "I should see him," Beatrice decided, though her stomach churned at the prospect. Thomas Garrett's letters had been kind and straightforward. He was a widower of 35 who owned a modest ranch and wanted a wife to share his life with. He had not asked for beauty or refinement, just honesty and a willingness to work hard. She had been honest in her letters, at least about everything except the scandal. Now she would have to face him knowing that he had almost certainly heard the rumors. "All right then. I will wait downstairs and give you a few minutes to freshen up." After Warren left, Beatrice stood in the center of the small but clean room and allowed herself exactly 1 minute of despair. She covered her face with her hands and breathed deeply, forcing back the tears and the fear and the crushing weight of humiliation. Then she straightened her spine, washed her face and hands in the basin provided, and went downstairs to face whatever came next. The doctor's office was a tidy building at the far end of Main Street. Warren walked beside her with an easy stride, touching his hat to the people they passed, but not stopping for conversation. Beatrice noticed that several people stared openly while others turned away as though the sight of her might be contagious. The weight of judgment pressed down on her shoulders, familiar and hateful. Inside the doctor's office, they found Thomas Garrett propped up in a bed with his left leg splinted and elevated. He was a solid man with thinning brown hair and a weathered face that spoke of long hours outdoors. When he saw Beatrice, his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to identify. "Miss Reynolds," he said after a moment, "I am truly sorry about this. Not exactly the greeting I had planned. Mr. Garrett, I am sorry you were injured." Beatrice twisted her hands together, searching for the right words. "I understand if you have changed your mind about our arrangement. I should have told you about the situation in Philadelphia, but I hoped." She trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence honestly. Thomas exchanged a glance with Warren, who had stationed himself near the door like a quiet sentinel. "I heard the rumors," Thomas admitted. "Mrs. Harrington was quite eager to share them, but Warren here pointed out that I should probably hear your side before making any decisions." Beatrice took a shaky breath and told the story as simply and clearly as she could. She explained about her position as a governess, about Harold Pemberton's unwanted attentions over several weeks, about the day he had cornered her in the library and locked the door. She described fighting him off, the sound of the key turning and the horrified faces of his fiancée and her family when they broke down the door to find Beatrice disheveled and Harold with scratches on his face that she had put there. "He said I had seduced him," she finished quietly. "And because he was wealthy and well-connected, everyone believed him. I lost my position, my references, and any chance of finding decent work. My own family was so ashamed they would not even see me. Coming west as a mail-order bride was my only option left. The room was silent for a long moment after she finished. Beatrice kept her gaze fixed on her hands, unable to bear seeing disbelief or condemnation in Thomas's face. "I appreciate you telling me," Thomas said finally. "And I believe you." Beatrice's head snapped up in surprise. Thomas offered a tired smile. "My late wife was assaulted by a man when she was 16. No one believed her either because the man was well liked in the community. She carried that pain her whole life, and it made her cautious about trusting people. I learned from her that women get blamed for men's sins more often than they get justice." He shifted in the bed with a grimace of pain. "That said, I need to be honest with you, Miss Reynolds. I am not sure I am up for the battle that marrying you is going to cause in this town. Mrs. Harrington has influence, and she will make both our lives difficult." The disappointment was crushing, but Beatrice understood. She had gambled everything on this chance and lost. "I understand. I will take the next stage back east." "Now hold on," Warren interjected. Both Beatrice and Thomas looked at him in surprise. "Thomas, you are laid up for weeks at minimum. Your ranch needs tending, your animals need care, and you cannot do any of it with a broken leg. Miss Reynolds needs a place to stay and a way to earn her keep. Seems to me there is an obvious solution here." Thomas frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that Miss Reynolds could stay at your ranch as a housekeeper while you recover. That gives both of you time to figure out if you actually suit each other, which you cannot do with you stuck in this bed and her stuck in a hotel room. It also gives the town time to settle down and move on to the next scandal." "That would not be proper," Beatrice protested. "A single woman living alone with a single man, even an injured one." "So we chaperone," Warren said simply. "My ranch is only 3 miles from Thomas's place. I can bunk in Thomas's barn and check on things there anyway, make sure everything is running smooth. That keeps it all above board." Thomas considered this, his brow furrowed. "That is asking a lot of you, Warren. You have got your own place to run." "My place practically runs itself these days. The hands know what they are doing, and I have got a good foreman. Besides, you would do the same for me." Warren looked at Beatrice. "What do you think, Miss Reynolds? Are you willing to try it?" Beatrice's mind raced through the implications. It was irregular, certainly, but no more irregular than marrying a stranger sight unseen. And it would give her time to decide if she truly wanted to marry Thomas Garrett, rather than simply marrying anyone who would have her out of desperation. "I am willing," she said carefully. "But I want to be clear that I will not be pressured into marriage if we decide we do not suit. And I will work for my keep regardless of whether we eventually marry or not." "That seems fair," Thomas agreed. "Lord knows my place could use a woman's touch. My housekeeping has gone to hell since Margaret died." "Then it is settled," Warren said with satisfaction. "I will take Miss Reynolds back to the hotel, let her rest tonight, and we will head out to Thomas's place in the morning." "Doc, how much longer do you need to keep Thomas here?" The doctor, who had been listening to this entire exchange from his desk in the corner, cleared his throat. "Another week at least. I want to make sure that leg is setting properly and there is no infection. After that, he can go home, but he will need help for several weeks more." Warren nodded. "We will make it work." As they walked back to the hotel through the gathering dusk, Beatrice found herself studying Warren Lansing from the corner of her eye. He was a puzzle to her, this tall cowboy who had stepped in to defend a stranger, and then rearranged his own life to help solve her problems. Men, in her experience, did not do such things without expecting something in return. "Why are you helping me?" she asked abruptly. Warren glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Do I need a reason?" "In my experience, yes. People do not help without wanting something." "Well, Your experience has been with the wrong kind of people then." He was quiet for a moment, then continued in a more thoughtful tone. "My mother was in a situation similar to yours once, before she met my father. A man in her town spread lies about her, said she had been improper with him when the truth was he could not stand being rejected. She was run out of town by people who would not listen to her side. It destroyed something in her, that injustice. She never fully recovered from it." "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly. "She died when I was 15, and I promised myself then that I would not stand by and watch people tear down someone's reputation based on rumors and lies. Maybe I cannot fix what happened to you in Philadelphia, but I can at least make sure you get a fair chance here in Durango." They had reached the hotel. Warren paused at the bottom of the steps, his hat in his hands. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "I think you are brave. It takes courage to keep going after the kind of hurt you have endured." Beatrice felt that tightness in her throat again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." She went upstairs to her room and lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the town settling into night. Tomorrow she would start a new chapter of her life, one she had not anticipated. As uncertain as it was, at least it was a chance. And for the first time in a very long time, someone had looked at her and chosen to see possibility instead of shame. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Warren arrived at the hotel just after breakfast with a wagon and team. He helped Beatrice load her few belongings, then assisted her up onto the wagon seat with a courtesy that felt genuine rather than perfunctory. The ride out to Thomas Garrett's ranch took about 45 minutes through beautiful high country. The mountains rose up around them, pine-covered and majestic, and the air was so clean it almost hurt to breathe after the coal smoke and grime of Philadelphia. Despite her nervousness about the future, Beatrice found herself relaxing slightly as they traveled further from town. "It is beautiful here," she said, watching an eagle soar overhead. "Colorado is God's country," Warren agreed. "I have been other places, but nothing compares to this. The winters can be harsh, but the rest of the year makes up for it." Thomas Garrett's ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy log house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Beatrice could hear chickens clucking somewhere behind the house. It looked like the kind of place where a person could build a good life if they were willing to work for it. Inside, the house was as untidy as Thomas had warned. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, dust coated every surface, and the floors desperately needed sweeping. But the bones of the house were good, with solid furniture and large windows that let in plenty of light. Beatrice could see the traces of a woman's touch in the curtains and the placement of furniture, remnants of Thomas's late wife that had slowly been buried under neglect. "I will start with the kitchen," she decided, rolling up her sleeves, "and then work my way through the rest." Warren brought in firewood and got the stove going, then showed her where Thomas kept supplies. He worked alongside her for several hours, and Beatrice was struck by how easy it was to be around him. He did not talk unnecessarily, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and often made her laugh. He treated her like a regular person, not like damaged goods or a scandal waiting to happen. By early afternoon, the kitchen was clean and Beatrice had put together a simple stew for dinner. Warren had swept out the bedrooms and helped her change the linens on the bed she would be using. It was all very domestic and proper, but there was an ease between them that surprised Beatrice. She had expected awkwardness, but instead she felt oddly comfortable. Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Warren slept in the barn as promised, rising early to help with the heavier chores before heading back to check on his own ranch. Beatrice cleaned and cooked and slowly brought order to Thomas's household. In the evenings, after supper, she and Warren would sit on the porch and talk while the sun set behind the mountains. She learned that Warren was 28 and had been running his ranch for 6 years after inheriting it from an uncle. He had never married, though he admitted there had been someone once, a woman who had chosen city life over the hard work of ranching. He spoke of his land with genuine love, describing each pasture and creek like they were old friends. He was well-read despite limited formal education, and they spent hours discussing books they had both read. Beatrice found herself watching for him each morning, listening for the sound of his horse. When he smiled at something she said, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the Colorado sun. It was dangerous, she knew. She was supposed to be here to marry Thomas Garrett, not to develop feelings for his friend, but she could not seem to help it. Warren, for his part, was fighting his own internal battle. He had agreed to help Thomas out of friendship and a sense of justice. He had not expected to find himself drawn to Beatrice Reynolds with an intensity that kept him awake at night. She was beautiful, certainly, with those intelligent hazel eyes and the way sunlight caught in her hair. But it was more than that. It was her quiet strength, the way she refused to be broken by what had happened to her. It was her laugh, rare but genuine when it came. It was the way she threw herself into work without complaining, finding satisfaction in simple tasks done well. He knew he should step back, should put distance between them. But every morning he found himself riding to Thomas's ranch earlier than necessary, and every evening he lingered longer than he should. The situation came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon. Beatrice was in the garden behind the house, trying to salvage what she could of the overgrown vegetable patch. The sun was hot on her back, and she had removed her bonnet, not caring that her hair was coming loose from its pins. She was on her knees in the dirt, pulling weeds with fierce determination, when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up to see Warren riding in, but something was wrong. His face was tight with anger, and when he dismounted, his movements were sharp and controlled. "What happened?" she asked, getting to her feet and brushing dirt from her skirts. "I was just in town. Mrs. Harrington is spreading new rumors. She is telling everyone that you seduced Thomas, and that is why he got thrown from his horse, because he was distracted by lust." Warren's voice was hard. "She is also saying that you are living out here improperly, that I am not really staying in the barn, and that the whole arrangement is scandalous." Beatrice felt the familiar wash of shame and anger. Of course she is. People like her need someone to look down on so they can feel superior. "It is worse than that. She is organizing some of the church women to come out here and confront you. She wants to run you out of Durango entirely." "Maybe she is right. Maybe I should leave." Beatrice turned away, staring at the mountains without really seeing them. "I keep thinking I can outrun my past, but it always catches up. Perhaps it would be better if I just kept moving west until I run out of continent." "No." Warren's voice was firm, and when she looked at him, his eyes were blazing. "You did nothing wrong. You do not deserve to be chased from place to place by small-minded people who thrive on tearing others down. Deserve has nothing to do with it. It is just the way things are. Then we change the way things are." Warren moved closer, and Beatrice could feel the heat of his anger and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. "You want to stop the rumors, give them something real to talk about." "What do you mean, marry me instead of Thomas?" The words hung in the air between them, shocking in their boldness. Beatrice stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "What?" Warren ran a hand through his hair, his expression shifting from anger to something more vulnerable. "I know this is not how these things are supposed to happen. I know you came here to marry Thomas, and he is a good man who deserves a good wife. But I cannot keep pretending I do not have feelings for you, Beatrice. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, working alongside you, it has made me realize that I have been just going through the motions of life for years. You make me want to actually live again." Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Warren, you cannot mean this. You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you work hard without complaining. I know you are kind to animals and you laugh at my terrible jokes. I know you have been through hell and came out the other side with your integrity intact. I know that when you smile at me, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out." He took a breath. "And I know that the thought of you marrying Thomas, even though he is my friend and a good man, makes me want to put my fist through a wall." "I feel something for you too," Beatrice admitted in a whisper, "but I am terrified. The last time I trusted someone, the last time I let my guard down, it destroyed my life. I am not Harold Pemberton. I am not going to hurt you or betray you or use you." Warren closed the distance between them, taking her dirty, work-worn hands in his. "I am just a simple rancher who wants to build a life with a woman he admires and respects, and I think you might want the same thing, if you would let yourself." Beatrice looked up into his face, at those clear gray-blue eyes that had looked at her with nothing but honesty from the first moment they met. She thought about how safe she felt around him, how natural it seemed to work beside him, how her days had started to revolve around his presence. She thought about Thomas, kind and decent but essentially a stranger, and realized that while she could probably build a satisfactory life with him, she wanted more than just satisfactory. She wanted what she felt when Warren looked at her like he was looking at her now. "What about Thomas?" she asked. "He is your friend. We had an agreement. Thomas is laid up for several more weeks at minimum. I will talk to him, explain the situation. He is a decent man. He will understand." Warren squeezed her hands gently. "But I need to know what you want, Beatrice. Not what is proper or expected. What do you actually want?" Beatrice took a shaky breath. "I want you," she said. "I want to wake up and see your face. I want to work beside you and build something real. I want to stop running and finally have a home." The smile that spread across Warren's face was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. He raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with tears. "Then you shall have it, all of it. I promise you, Beatrice Reynolds, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." They stood there in the garden, hands clasped, making silent promises while the Colorado sun blazed overhead. Then Warren seemed to remember something, and his expression turned serious again. "We should talk to Thomas as soon as possible. I do not want to go behind his back on this." They rode into town together that afternoon. The doctor was surprised to see them but allowed them into Thomas's room. Thomas took one look at their faces and started laughing, though it clearly hurt his broken leg. "I knew it," he said, shaking his head. "Warren, you are about as subtle as a stampede. You have been mooning over her since the day she arrived." Warren had the grace to look embarrassed. "I apologize, Thomas. I did not plan for this to happen." "Do not apologize for falling in love, you fool. It is about the only thing worth doing in this life." Thomas looked at Beatrice with a kind expression. "You have feelings for him too, I take it." "I do," Beatrice admitted. "I am sorry. I know we had an agreement." "An agreement you entered into out of desperation, not desire," Thomas said gently. "I liked you from your letters, Miss Reynolds, and I think we could have made a decent marriage. But decent is not the same as what I had with my Margaret, and it is not what you clearly have with Warren here. I would be a selfish man indeed to stand in the way of that." "You are sure?" Warren asked. "I am sure. Besides, I have been thinking this past week that maybe I am not ready to marry again anyway. Maybe I jumped into this whole mail-order bride business before I properly grieved Margaret." Thomas shifted in his bed. "But I do expect to be invited to the wedding." Relief and joy flooded through Beatrice. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "You are a truly good man, Thomas Garrett. Just do me a favor and make him happy. Warren has been alone too long." As they left the doctor's office, Warren took Beatrice's hand openly, not caring who saw. They walked down Main Street together, and Beatrice felt a reckless courage building in her chest. She had spent so long being ashamed, being afraid of what people thought. But Warren had shown her that some opinions were not worth considering, and that the people who mattered would judge her fairly. They found Mrs. Harrington outside the general store, holding court with her usual circle of gossips. When she saw them approaching hand in hand, her eyes widened and then narrowed with malice. "Well," she said loudly, "I see the rumors about impropriety were correct after all." "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harrington," Warren said pleasantly. "I wanted you to be among the first to know that Miss Reynolds has agreed to become my wife. We will be married as soon as the arrangements can be made." A shocked silence fell over the group. Mrs. Harrington's face went through several shades of red before settling on an unbecoming purple. "This is outrageous. She was supposed to marry Thomas Garrett." Thomas released her from that agreement with his blessing. "It is all perfectly proper and above board, not that we require your approval." Warren's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Now, Miss Reynolds and I have wedding plans to make, so if you will excuse us." They walked away from the sputtering woman, and Beatrice had to cover her mouth to stifle a laugh. Once they were out of earshot, she let it out, a genuine belly laugh that felt like freedom. "Did you see her face?" she gasped. "I will treasure that memory forever," Warren agreed, grinning. "Come on, let us go see Reverend Walsh and set a date." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town. Beatrice wore a simple cream-colored dress that Warren had purchased for her from the dressmaker, the first new dress she had owned in years. Warren wore a new suit that he clearly felt uncomfortable in, tugging at the collar whenever he thought she was not looking. The church was not full, but the people who came were genuine in their well wishes. Thomas hobbled in on crutches, insisting that he would not miss it for the world. Several of Warren's ranch hands attended, along with a few townspeople who had chosen to give Beatrice a fair chance rather than believing Mrs. Harrington's gossip. As Beatrice walked down the aisle, she felt no nervousness, only certainty. Warren stood at the altar watching her approach with such obvious love in his eyes that she heard several women in the congregation sigh. When she reached him, he took her hands and held them tightly, as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. Reverend Walsh kept the ceremony simple and heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Warren spoke as clearly and firmly, his eyes never leaving hers. Beatrice repeated her own vows with equal conviction, meaning every word. They were promising to build a life together, to face whatever came as partners, to choose each other every day. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them man and wife, Warren cupped Beatrice's face in his hands with infinite gentleness and kissed her as though she was something precious and miraculous. The congregation applauded, and Beatrice felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. The reception was held at Warren's ranch, which Beatrice was seeing for the first time as her own home. It was larger than Thomas's place, with a beautiful main house and extensive outbuildings. Warren's ranch hands had decorated the main room with wildflowers, and someone had organized a potluck dinner that was surprisingly elaborate. As the evening wore on and guests mingled, eating and talking and celebrating, Warren pulled Beatrice aside to a quiet corner. "Happy?" he asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she answered honestly. I keep expecting to wake up and find this is all a dream. It is real. You are real, I am real, and this life we are starting is real." He kissed her forehead. "No more running, no more hiding. This is home now." They danced as the sun set, Warren surprisingly graceful despite his claims of being clumsy. Beatrice rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, letting herself fully accept that she was safe, she was loved, and she was finally home. The guests gradually departed as full darkness fell. Warren's foreman, a grizzled man named Charlie, was the last to leave, shaking Warren's hand with genuine warmth. "You did good, boss," he said. "Mrs. Lansing is a keeper." After everyone had gone, Warren and Beatrice stood on the porch of their home, looking out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the starry sky. Beatrice wore Warren's jacket over her dress against the evening chill, and his arm was secure around her waist. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else would. For defending me when you had no reason to. For giving me a chance to be happy again." Warren turned her in his arms so he could look at her properly. In the lamplight spilling from the house, his face was serious and tender. "You do not need to thank me for that. Loving you is not a favor or a charity. It is the greatest privilege of my life." He traced her jawline with his thumb. "I meant what I said that first day. I judge you by who you are right now, not by what anyone says you were or what happened to you. And who you are right now is the woman I want to spend every day with for the rest of my life." Beatrice reached up to kiss him, pouring all her gratitude and love and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren swept her up into his arms with a laugh. "What are you doing?" she protested, though she was laughing too, "carrying my bride over the threshold. It is traditional." He maneuvered them through the door and then set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lansing, Mrs. Lansing." Beatrice Reynolds was gone, and in her place was Beatrice Lansing, wife and partner and woman with a future instead of just a past. The name felt like a gift, like a new start, like everything she had been hoping for when she climbed onto that stagecoach in Philadelphia. That night, in the bedroom that was now theirs together, Warren made love to her with patience and tenderness. He took his time learning what made her gasp with pleasure, murmuring words of love and admiration against her skin. Beatrice, who had been braced for something brutal based on her experience with Harold Pemberton, found instead that intimacy could be beautiful and gentle and joyous. Afterwards, lying wrapped in Warren's arms, she finally understood what it meant to be cherished. The next weeks passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Beatrice threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, and Warren taught her everything about running a ranch. She learned to ride properly, to help with the cattle, to keep the books. Warren's hands accepted her presence easily, impressed by her willingness to work and her quick mind. Mrs. Harrington continued to spread gossip for a while, but it lost its power when people saw how genuinely happy Warren and Beatrice were together. Eventually, even she gave up and turned her attention to some other perceived scandal, leaving them in peace. Thomas healed well, and eventually started courting the widow who ran the boarding house in town. He and Warren remained good friends, and Thomas became a frequent dinner guest at the Lansing Ranch, where he and Beatrice developed their own friendship based on mutual respect and shared experience. As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant colors, Beatrice realized she had missed her monthly courses. When she told Warren, he picked her up and spun her around with a whoop of joy that brought the ranch hands running to see what the commotion was about. Their first child, a son they named William after Warren's father, was born the following June on a warm morning with the windows open to the mountain breeze. Warren held his son with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, then looked at Beatrice with such profound love that she knew she had found something precious beyond measure. "Thank you," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "For this, for everything, for being brave enough to start over." "Thank you for giving me a reason to," she replied, touching their son's tiny, perfect hand. Over the years, 3 more children followed William. A daughter named Margaret after Thomas's late wife, another son called James, and finally a second daughter they named Catherine. The ranch prospered under Warren's careful management and Beatrice's organizational skills. They expanded their herd, built a larger barn, and eventually hired more hands as the operation grew. Beatrice never forgot the lessons she had learned about judgment and second chances. She became known throughout Durango as someone who would help anyone in need without asking questions about their past. When a pregnant girl showed up in town having run away from a bad situation, Beatrice took her in without hesitation. When a man with a prison record needed work, Warren hired him on Beatrice's recommendation. They built a reputation for fairness and compassion that spread far beyond their immediate community. On their 10th anniversary, Warren took Beatrice back to the spot where he had first proposed in Thomas's garden, which they had purchased when Thomas decided to move into town permanently. He had transformed it into a beautiful flowering space, and in the center, he had placed a bench with a bronze plaque that read, "I judge you by who you are right now." "Do you remember that day?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bench as their children played nearby. "I remember every detail. I remember thinking my life was over, and you telling me it was just beginning." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saved me, Warren." "No," he corrected gently. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to keep going. I just had the good fortune to be there when you needed a friend." "You were never just a friend," she countered. "From that very first day when you stood up for me in front of the whole town, you were something more. I just did not have the words for it yet." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children chase butterflies through the flowers. William, now 9, was teaching 6-year-old Margaret how to identify different wildflowers. 5-year-old James was collecting interesting rocks, and 3-year-old Catherine was mostly just running in circles and laughing. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked. "Everything that happened, everything you went through to get here." Beatrice considered the question seriously. She thought about the pain and humiliation of Philadelphia, the fear and uncertainty of the journey west, the public judgment she had endured. She thought about all the easier paths her life might have taken if Harold Pemberton had not decided to corner her that day, if she had married someone suitable in Philadelphia, if she had never needed to become a mail-order bride at all. "No," she said finally. "Because all of that led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. I would not change anything if it meant losing what we have built together." Warren kissed her temple. "I was hoping you would say that, because I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a compass. When Beatrice looked closer, she saw that the compass had no directions marked on it, just the words "Home is here" inscribed in tiny letters around the edge. "You told me once that you kept running until you ran out of continent," Warren explained as he fastened the necklace around her neck. "I wanted you to have a reminder that you do not need to run anymore. Wherever I am, wherever our family is, that is your true north. That is home." Beatrice touched the pendant with trembling fingers, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the man who had given it. "I love you," she said. "I do not say it enough, but I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." "I love you too," Warren replied. "And I promise to spend the rest of our lives proving to you that you were right to choose me, right to trust me, right to build this life with me." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They gathered their children and headed back to the ranch house for supper. Catherine insisted on being carried, so Warren hoisted her onto his shoulders while William held Margaret's hand and James walked beside Beatrice, telling her an elaborate story about the magical properties of the rocks he had collected. The ranch house glowed with lamplight as they approached, warm and welcoming. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Beatrice could see their housekeeper, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Chen, moving around inside preparing the evening meal. The barn was full of healthy animals, the fields were productive, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Warren and Beatrice sat together on their bed, reviewing the ledgers for the ranch. It was a weekly ritual, this combining of the practical and the intimate, discussing business matters in the private space they shared as husband and wife. "We had a good month," Warren noted, pointing to the figures. "The cattle prices held steady, and that new bull you insisted we purchase is proving his worth." "I told you he was a good investment," Beatrice said with satisfaction. "Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. You were right. You usually are when it comes to the business side of things." He closed the ledger and set it aside. "Thomas stopped by yesterday while you were in town. He wanted to ask if we would stand up with him when he marries Alice next month." "Of course we will. I am so happy for him. Alice is perfect for him." Beatrice smiled. "It is strange to think that if things had gone according to the original plan, I would be married to Thomas, and you would be standing up at our wedding as his best man." "Fate works in mysterious ways," Warren agreed, "though I am grateful every day that it worked out the way it did." They prepared for bed in the easy companionship of long marriage, each anticipating the other's movements and needs. As they settled under the quilts Beatrice had made from scraps of fabric that told the story of their life together, Warren pulled her close against his side. "Do you ever think about what you would say to that girl on the stage coach?" he asked. "The one who arrived in Durango so scared and alone." Beatrice thought about it. "I would tell her that the worst day of her life was actually the doorway to the best days. I would tell her to be brave just a little longer, because there is a tall cowboy waiting who will see her for who she truly is. I would tell her that she is stronger than she knows, and that she deserves all the happiness coming her way. I would tell that cowboy meeting the stage that day to trust his instincts," Warren added. "That the woman stepping down is going to turn his world upside down in the best possible way, and that defending her in front of the town is going to be the best decision he ever makes." They lay quietly for a while, listening to the familiar night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance, and the wind whispered through the pine trees surrounding the house. It was the soundtrack of home, as familiar and comforting as breathing. "Warren," Beatrice said into the darkness. "Yes, when you said you judge me by who I am right now, you gave me permission to stop being defined by my past, but you also gave me something even more important." "What was that?" "You gave me permission to believe I had a future worth living. You saw possibility in me when I could only see damage. That was the real gift." She turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "You taught me that who we are is not determined by what was done to us, but by how we choose to move forward." Warren cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "You taught me something too. You taught me that real strength is not about being unbreakable. It is about being broken and finding the courage to put yourself back together. You did that, Beatrice. You survived something that would have destroyed a lesser person, and you came through it with your goodness intact. That is what I saw that first day, and that is what I see every day we are together." They made love slowly and sweetly, a reaffirmation of vows spoken years ago and kept faithfully every day since. Afterwards, wrapped in each other's arms, they drifted off to sleep with the contentment of two people who had found their place in the world. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. The children grew strong and capable, learning to work the land and care for the animals. William showed a talent for training horses and eventually took over that aspect of the ranch operations. Margaret inherited her mother's head for numbers and managed the business side of things with impressive efficiency. James developed a passion for veterinary medicine and went away to study, though he always came back to help during busy seasons. Catherine proved to be a gifted artist, capturing the beauty of Colorado in paintings that eventually sold in galleries throughout the territory. Warren and Beatrice aged together with grace, their faces gaining lines that told stories of laughter and hard work and love. Warren's hair went silver at the temples, and Beatrice developed a few gray strands that she refused to hide. They wore their age as a badge of honor, proof of years well lived, and a partnership that had weathered every storm. On their 25th anniversary, the children threw them a surprise party that brought together seemingly everyone in Durango and the surrounding ranches. Even Mrs. Harrington attended, significantly mellowed by age and several grandchildren of her own. She approached Beatrice with something resembling humility, which was so unusual that Beatrice almost did not recognize her. "Mrs. Lansing," the older woman said stiffly, "I want to apologize for how I treated you when you first arrived. I was wrong to judge you based on gossip and rumor. You have proven yourself to be a woman of remarkable character, and Durango is better for your presence." Beatrice was so shocked she nearly dropped her glass of punch. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. That means a great deal to me. I have been thinking lately about the harm that gossip can do, Mrs. Harrington continued. My own granddaughter was the victim of malicious rumors last year, and it made me realize how quick we all are to believe the worst about people, especially women. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt from the beginning." "We all make mistakes," Beatrice said gently. "The important thing is that we learn from them." After Mrs. Harrington moved away, Warren appeared at Beatrice's elbow with a knowing smile. "Did that really just happen?" "I believe it did. Will wonders never cease?" "You have that effect on people," Warren said, slipping an arm around her waist. "You make them want to be better than they are." The party continued late into the evening with music and dancing and storytelling. Old friends shared memories of Warren and Beatrice's early days together, embellishing the stories until they took on the quality of legend. The way people told it now, Warren had swept Beatrice off her feet the moment she stepped off the stagecoach, and their love had been obvious to everyone from the start. Beatrice did not bother correcting the stories. The truth was more complicated and messier, but also more beautiful in its reality. They had not fallen in love at first sight. They had built their love carefully over time, foundation stone by foundation stone, until it was solid enough to weather anything. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Thomas pulled Warren and Beatrice aside. He was now 60 years old, happily married to Alice and a doting grandfather to their combined families. "I just want you two to know," he said with characteristic bluntness, "that if I had married Beatrice like we originally planned, I would have ruined both our chances at real happiness. Warren, she was always meant to be yours. And Beatrice, you brought out something in him that none of us knew was there. You two are proof that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for." "Thank you, Thomas," Beatrice said, hugging him warmly. "And thank you for being gracious enough to step aside when you did. You are a true friend." "Just promise me one thing," Thomas said. Promise me that when you are old and gray and sitting on your porch watching your grandchildren play, you will remember that it all started with a broken leg and a borrowed wagon." "How could we forget?" Warren laughed. "That broken leg of yours changed all our lives." After everyone had finally left and the children had cleaned up the remnants of the party, Warren and Beatrice took their traditional walk out to the garden bench. It was a warm summer night, and the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a sky absolutely blazing with stars. 25 years, Beatrice marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. "I prefer the second one," Warren said. "I cannot really remember what my life was like before you were in it. Or rather, I can remember, but it seems colorless somehow. You brought the brightness." "We brought it to each other," Beatrice corrected. "I was so broken when I arrived here, Warren. I thought I would spend the rest of my life just trying to survive, just trying to avoid more pain. But you showed me that surviving was not enough. You taught me to actually live again." Warren took her hand, lacing their fingers together. His hands were weathered and calloused from decades of ranch work, but his touch was still as gentle as it had been on their wedding day. "You remember what I said to you in this garden the day I proposed?" he asked. "You said a lot of things that day. Which part are you thinking of?" "The part about judging you by who you were right then, not by your past." Warren turned to face her fully. "I want you to know that I have lived by that principle every day of our marriage. Every morning I wake up and I look at you, and I see the woman you are in that moment. Not the young governess who was wronged or the frightened mail-order bride or any other version of you from the past. I see my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, the woman who makes me want to be better than I am." Beatrice felt tears welling up, but they were good tears, the kind that came from being deeply moved. "You have given me such a beautiful life, Warren, more than I ever dreamed was possible. Sometimes I still cannot believe it is real." "It is real," he assured her, wiping away a tear that had spilled over onto her cheek. "And it is going to keep being real for however many years we have left. We are going to grow old together, watch our grandchildren grow up, maybe even meet great-grandchildren if we are lucky. We are going to keep working this land and loving each other and building on everything we have created together." They sat on the bench until late into the night, talking and reminiscing and making plans for the future. The ranch that had started as Warren's solitary enterprise was now a thriving family operation, and there were discussions about which of the children might eventually take it over entirely. William seemed the most likely candidate, but Margaret's business acumen would be essential, and James had promised to be available for all veterinary needs even if he established his own practice. As they finally made their way back to the house, walking slowly with their arms around each other, Beatrice felt a profound sense of completion. Her life had taken such an unexpected turn that day she arrived in Durango, terrified and alone and certain that her future held nothing but shame and struggle. Instead, she had found love, purpose, family, and a home that nourished her soul. The next morning, Beatrice woke early as she always did, slipping out of bed without waking Warren. She made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over the mountains and paint the world in shades of gold and pink. The ranch was stirring to life, with hands heading out to begin the day's work and animals calling to be fed. This was her kingdom, she thought with satisfaction. Not because she ruled it, but because she belonged to it and it belonged to her. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every flower in the garden represented something she and Warren had built together through hard work and mutual support and unwavering love. She heard Warren's footsteps on the stairs and turned to see him entering the kitchen, his hair rumpled from sleep and his shirt untucked. Even at 53, he still made her heart skip a beat. Some things never changed. "Morning, beautiful," he said, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "I am thinking about how lucky I am," she answered, leaning back against his solid warmth. "And how grateful I am that you were the one who met that stagecoach 25 years ago." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Warren said. "It was fate, destiny, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. We were always meant to find each other." They stood together in the peaceful morning, drinking coffee and watching their world come alive with a new day. And in that moment, Beatrice understood that this was what happiness looked like. Not some grand, dramatic gesture or constant excitement, but this quiet contentment, this bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be with exactly who she was supposed to be with. The story that had begun with judgment and scandal had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. The mail-order bride who had arrived with nothing but a troubled reputation and a desperate hope had become a respected rancher's wife, a devoted mother, and a valued member of her community. And the cowboy who had looked past gossip to see the truth of who she was had been rewarded with a love that deepened with every passing year. Years later, when Beatrice was in her 70s and Warren was nearing 80, they would still take their evening walks to the garden bench. Their children were grown with families of their own, and the ranch was now officially in William and Margaret's capable hands, though Warren still consulted on major decisions, and Beatrice still kept a sharp eye on the books. One evening in late autumn, as the first cold winds began to blow down from the mountains, they sat bundled in warm coats on their bench, watching the sunset. Warren's hair was completely white now, and his movements were slower, but his eyes still lit up whenever he looked at Beatrice. "Tell me something," Beatrice said suddenly. "If you could go back to that day on Main Street when I first arrived, knowing everything that was going to happen, would you still defend me? Would you still take the risk of involving yourself with someone whose reputation was in tatters?" Warren did not even hesitate. Without a single doubt, meeting you, marrying you, building this life with you has been the defining joy of my existence. I would do it all again exactly the same way, except maybe I would kiss you sooner. Beatrice laughed, the sound carrying across the garden. "I do not think I was ready to be kissed any sooner than it happened. I needed time to learn to trust again. And I needed time to learn that love was worth the risk of pain," Warren added. "My heart had been locked up pretty tight before you came along. You taught me to be vulnerable again." They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead. Beatrice thought about the long journey of her life, from that terrified young woman on the stagecoach to the contented older woman she was now. There had been hardships and challenges along the way, certainly, but there had also been so much joy, so much love, so many moments of pure happiness that they added up to a life well lived. "I want you to promise me something," Beatrice said quietly. "Anything. When I am gone, I want you to remember me the way you have always looked at me. Not as the woman with the troubled reputation or the mail-order bride who almost married someone else. Remember me as your wife, your partner, the woman who loved you more than anything." Warren's voice was thick with emotion when he responded. "I will always remember you exactly as you are right now. That is my promise to you, the same promise I made on a dusty street in Durango 25 years ago. I judge you by who you are right now, and who you are right now is the love of my life, today and always." They held hands as the darkness deepened around them, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. And when they finally rose to head back inside, moving slowly but still together, They knew that whatever time they had left would be filled with the same love that had sustained them through decades of shared life. The mail-order bride with the troubled reputation had found her redemption not in proving her innocence to those who had judged her, but in building a life so full of love and meaning that the past no longer mattered. And the cowboy who had seen past scandal to the truth of her character had been rewarded with the kind of love that poets write about and dreamers long for. Their story became legend in Durango, told and retold with each generation. It was a reminder that second chances were possible, that judgment based on gossip was worse than worthless, and that love could bloom in the most unexpected places. Long after Warren and Beatrice were gone, couples would visit their garden and sit on the bench that bore those words, "I judge you by who you are right now." And they would remember that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is look past reputation and rumor to see the truth of another human being. Sometimes the greatest love stories start not with love at first sight, but with a choice to give someone a chance they might not deserve, and to be rewarded when they prove to deserve it after all. In the end, Beatrice and Warren lived into their 80s, passing within a year of each other as couples who have been deeply connected often do. They died knowing they had lived fully, loved completely, and left behind a legacy that extended far beyond their own lives. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had taught about compassion and second chances, and seeing people for who they truly were rather than who others claimed they should be. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, still bearing the Lansing name, still run with the principles of hard work and fair dealing that Warren and Beatrice had established. And in the garden, carefully tended by each new generation, the bench remained as a memorial to a love that had started with one simple, radical act, choosing to believe in someone when the rest of the world had written her off. That, in the end, was the true story of the mail-order bride with the troubled reputation, and the cowboy who said, "I judge you by who you are right now." It was a story about the power of being seen, of being believed, and of finding that one person who looks past all your damage and sees the beauty underneath. It was a story about redemption, about second chances, and about building something lasting from the ruins of what came before. And it was, above all else, a love story for the ages,